Now that we have the VirtualBox set up and all the software installed, we're just going to go through a small SQL review because we will be using some SQL in this course, and obviously you're going to be using SQL throughout this degree in your career. So, first thing we're going to need to do is start your server. So bring up VirtualBox Manager. If it is powered off, you should have ADB in here like this. Hit the Start button. This will bring up the server. And for now, once it's finished and everything comes up, we can minimize both the server as well as the manager. And by the way, just for the rest of this course, when I refer to the VirtualBox Manager, I'm referring to this window. So let's minimize that. Next, when I talk about the VirtualBox window, this is what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and don't shut it down, just minimize it. And now let's go ahead and start with SQL. So, first thing we need to do is add a new connection to SQL Pro. So go ahead and start up SQL Pro. Again, ignore all the rest. You're going to hit the plus button here for a new connection. And you're going to fill this out as is. VB is going to be the name for our VirtualBox. 127.0.0.1 is what goes in the host. Root and ADB goes in as the username and password. And the port is 3306. So once you have that entered and your VirtualBox is up and running, hit connect. And we should get this all familiar window such as this. Now, one more thing before we move any further, there should be a few files you had to download for this lesson. I created a folder here called ADB Material. You can put the files wherever you want, but you should have a zip file. When it opens up, there should be ADB PDF, I believe you download separate. But then there should be ADB SQL and sample data SQL. And you can see the sizes over here. Make sure yours match approximately. And now we're going to work in SQL. So the first thing we need to do is create two databases. One's going to be called ADB, and the other one's going to be called sample data. And we're going to keep these case sensitive. So for those of you who may have forgotten or need a refresher, where it says choose database, I'm going to go ahead and hit add database. Database name is going to be ADB, and I'm going to keep it capital and hit add. And then I'm going to click on the query window. And these SQL files are actually SQL dumps. So I'm going to take the adb.sql file, I'm going to drag it over into the window. Yes, I want to go ahead and proceed, and of course this will take a moment. And when you're done, hit this down arrow and hit run all queries. This will go ahead and run all of the queries, and again, this is a SQL dump which we covered in database structures a few months ago. Once it loads, we can hit Command A to copy it and delete this, and just check that we have a customer database, customer table, ADB database, customer table, addresses, items, category, order item, item publisher, and orders. And if you have all of that, we're good. The next thing we're going to do is create a second database called sample data. So again, go up here, click on add database. The name is sample data. Go to your query window, and this file is a little bigger. Grab your sample data and drop it into this window. And it will take a moment. One thing I do want to stress is that although SQL Pro is running on our Mac, we're connected to MySQL running on the VirtualBox, on the virtual server. So we are not running MAMP. MAMP doesn't need to be running because we're not talking to that instance, that install of MySQL. We are talking to the VirtualBox. So once it loads, hit run all queries. And again, it's just importing the SQL dump, creating tables, data, doing inserts, creating indexes, and all the other stuff that made up this database when I created it. Again, once it's done, click in the query window, hit Command A and delete it. And we'll just take a quick look through. We should have a list of cities, country, languages, DVDs, email domains, first names, items, categories, publishers, last names, and so on and so forth. Some of these will look familiar, like the occupation table or maybe the vehicle table, but there's other ones in here now, like a state table and a city table. Okay, once you've done the import, the other one we're going to look at is the PDF file. So you can go ahead and bring this one up, and I'll shrink it down just a bit. Okay, little review. We're going to be working mostly today in that ADB database, so let's switch over to there. And remember, on the left we have tables listed here: customer, customer address. And if we click on one and click on something like relations, we can see that there are relations. Remember, relations are also called foreign keys. Now I went ahead and used MySQL Workbench and generated an ER diagram, which you should be familiar with, just to give you an overview that we have customers. Customers have addresses. If you recall from this line here and the crow's feet, one customer can have multiple addresses, and then one customer can place multiple orders. Orders can have multiple items on them. And for every order item, it of course has to point at an item ID, which is the item table here. And then for every item, there's a category and a publisher. Or maybe. There may not be publishers for certain items, but they should all fit into categories. So, we talked about primary keys. That's the little yellow key here. Remember, that is the unique value for that table. Foreign keys are the relations, these parts that connect tables together. And then the ER diagram, which is what we're looking at right now. Let's go ahead and do a little exercise here. And I prepared some SQL, but we're going to go ahead and follow along with the slides. And if you recall in SQL, one of the things we concentrated on was this lovely term called CRUD. CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. So let's review that by creating a new customer by inserting into the customer table. Well, if we look at the customer table, I look at the fields. So actually I'll click on structure. Customer ID is auto-incremented, so we don't need that, but I do need a first name, a last name, a username, a password, so on and so forth. So here is my insert statement. Insert into customer, and then inside of parentheses, I list my target columns. So I'm listing the first name, last name, username, password, email, primary, date of birth, gender, occupation, primary vehicle, and created date. And then, after the word values, I list the values that are targeting those fields. So John is going to go into first name, Doe goes into last name, J Doe goes into username, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to hit run here. It says it run. Of course, we get nothing back, but I'm going to go into the customer table. I'm going to click on customer ID twice, just to make sure my user ID 3724, there's my new user. So the next thing I wanted to do was create a new address for this person. Well, there's a customer address table. Again, we inserted into customer. Now I need to insert into customer address, and I need a customer ID. So what I need to memorize is this number 3724. Remember that primary key. So if I go now and go to insert into customer address, I need to put in for customer ID 3724. That was correct. 3724. Yep. And again, it's insert into customer address. Remember, it doesn't matter if it's on one line or multiple lines. I like this format for me. If it works for you, great. If you like everything on a separate line or everything on one line, that's your call. So I'm going to insert into customer address. I'm going to say, let's see, for Prime, we're going to put in a 1. I live on 123 Main Street, Orlando, Florida, 32801. So if I run this, I'm going to go to customer address here, content, and I'm going to say, let's look where the customer ID is 3724. And there's my 123 Main Street. Next, we're going to do a select, and I want to display the row from the item table where the title is Dread 3D Black T-shirt extra large. Well, in order to do that, I'm going to look at the item table and say we're looking where the title is equal to that value. So for the select, it's going to look like this. I'm going to select star. I didn't specify the column, so I'll do a star from item where title equals that. And I'm surrounding it in single quotes. And if I hit run, there it is. It's item 134, and it's $16.99. Okay. Next, we're going to update it. I don't like was it $16.99? We're selling it for $9.99. So how do we do an update to change that? Well, it's item ID 134. So I'm going to say update item, set the retail price. I'm going to make sure. So if we look at the item table, retail price is the column, equal to $9.99. It's not in quotes because it is a numeric value. Remember, only strings need to be in quotes. Say where item ID is 134. So if I run this, one row affected. I'm going to rerun this first select here, and you can see the item price is now $9.99. Cool. Next one. We're going to remove the Hello Kitty Hugger plush with fleece throw. Oh no. Okay. I have a select statement in here, but you know what? I want to run, I want to run a select before I run a delete. I just want to make sure I got it right. So if I run that, select star from item where title equals the title, I see, okay, here is that Hello Kitty throw fleece. And there's only one in here. So I could do two things. I could copy the title and put it in there, but I'm going to go ahead and just say where the item ID equals 790. Because again, that's the primary key. It makes it unique. I'm going to run this statement here. Ooh. Foreign key fails. Well, let's do this. Let's do the select again. And do you know why it's not letting me delete it? It's because it's got some foreign key violations. Again, I'm going to run this again, and it's going to say that it is conflicting with order item. So I actually want to do this intentional. The syntax for delete is correct, but it's not deleting because there are already items ordered for this. Meaning if we look over here, we're looking for item ID 790. Unfortunately, there's values in this order item table where the item ID is 790. Remember those foreign keys? So I'll tell you what, we're just going to leave it as is. We're not going to run that select. And we're going to go ahead and just leave this on here. Probably would be a good idea is to have a column in here to say deleted or status ID. That's usually what I do in my professional work. I try never to delete data if I don't have to. But we'll leave that as is. So next, the dreaded joins. So for a moment, let's run this statement here. I want to select the item ID, title, category, and publisher in a single statement. Well, I know I want the item ID, title, category, and publisher. So let's do it this way. The item ID, well, I know I can get that from the item table. So I'm going to start off by saying from item. Title, well, I know I can get title from the item table. So we're good. Category, though, is not inside of the item table, but it is inside of item category, but it's called item category name. So I'm going to copy that and say we're going to select the item category name, but it's not in the item table, so we need to join in the item category table on. Now when we say on, we need to join this table to one of the above ones, and since there's only one table here, we need to join item category to item, and we need to go ahead and give it a specific column to join on. So the common column between item category and the item table, well, it's that item category ID. So what I'll say is item category dot item category ID equals item dot category ID. Now we're almost there, but I don't have the publisher either. But if I look at my ER diagram, I do have a publisher table, and again, the common column between the two of them is they both have an item publisher ID. So I'm going to go ahead and just add this on here and say join item publisher on item publisher dot item publisher ID is equal to item dot item publisher ID. So if I wrote everything right now, I got something wrong. Well, there is no publisher. That column doesn't exist in any of the tables. It's called item publisher name. So I'm going to change that, and now there is the item ID, the title, the category name, and the publisher name. So we have all the columns we need, and we had to join 3 tables together. Now, I said change the statement to include items without a publisher. Well, let's go and take a look at the ER diagram. What we want to do is we did what's called an inner join to say when we join item category ID here to item category ID here, there must be a relation, meaning if there's a item that doesn't have a category, it won't be in there. Well, that's not the case for now. However, not all items have a publisher. So we're only getting back 16,000 rows because we're saying that the item publisher ID, must match an item publisher ID here. But if we look at that item table, some of these publishers are nulls. So we're omitting those. How to fix this is, well, here's publisher. I want everything in the item table. So I'm going to say, remember that left join? I want everything in item, and then if it's in the item publisher, great, but I don't want to exclude it. So now if I run this, we have 16,307 as far as the row count. If I run that again, now I get 24,000. And what we'll see is if I scroll down, some of these publishers, that's way down, I guess. Here we go, are null. And those were originally omitted from that first query where we were doing an inner join. So again, a left join says, get me everything from one table and then join it to the other table if it exists. The inner join says it must exist in both tables. If you have trouble with joins, you'll be happy there are no joins in Mungo. So that might be a benefit. All right, next, create indexes. It says we need to create an index on the last name, and I could go ahead and write you a create index statement. But you guys did that in database structures, so we're going to take the easy way out. We're going to use the GUI, the graphical interface. So let's go to customer, let's go to structure. Here's our indexes. I'm going to hit the plus button here. I'm going to say I need an index on the last name field, and I'm going to hit add. And that's it. Down here it says, there is your last name index, and we're done. Here's a trick I didn't show you in DBS, database structures. Click on console, it actually shows you all the statements that we just ran. So, alter table customer add index last name. Remember I said way long ago that everything that SQL Pro does gets passed as SQL to the database? Well, here's the SQL. So technically you could double click and just copy that and paste that. That's the easy way to do it. Isn't that wonderful? All right, next time we want to go ahead and create a unique index on email primary. Well, that's essentially the same. We're still going to hit the plus here. but instead of hitting unique index or full index, index or full index, we'll hit unique, and it's supposed to be on the column email primary. I'll hit add, and now that made a unique index. Finally, there were some more advanced statements we went over. We're really not going to use it in the course, but I do want to go ahead and just go over a few of them, just to do a little refresher. If we want to get the average item of all prices in the database, we can just say select, let's see if I can make that bigger. Select the average retail price from item. This is of course going to return a single row, and my average item price is $14.84. I can also group things. So instead of getting the average price for everything, I could say select the category ID and then the average price, group from item, group by category ID. And what this is going to do is break those averages into groups. And then we can even take this a little further and say, I'm only interested where the average price is greater than 10. So I'm going to alias this. So where the average retail price as average retail price. And then at the end, I'm going to add on a having. Remember, having is what we use to filter on dynamically created columns, meaning data that comes out of a function or is created by a formula or something like that. So I'm going to say having average retail price greater than 10. So this one and this one and this one should disappear. And there's our two columns with the average retail price greater than 10, the category. So that concludes this lesson. We will be using SQL in this course, and I know you will be using it throughout the next probably courses till you graduate from this degree at Full Sail. So if you have any questions, please locate your instructor and make sure you can get through this lesson as well as the lab.